Hello everyone. 17-year-old James Nestor Candy was said to be a quiet kid with a wicked sense of humor. He loved baseball, hunting, raising the animals on the farm he lived on with his family, the rodeo, and playing with his dog named Reggie. He was a country boy through and through. However, in August of 2017, he would vanish from his family's farm near Vegreville, Alberta, which is an hour east of Edmonton. Now, 6 years prior, the family had actually lost their home and they ended up relocating to this farm in a rural area. And it was said that James actually thrived once they moved there. He was said to love working on the farm. His parents, Colin and Karen, didn't even have to ask him to do the chores. He loved feeding and caring for the animals. He would shovel the snow. He would do whatever his parents needed him to. He fished and hunted with his father. He even hauled hay for the fun of it. And he was obsessed with riding bulls at the rodeo, and that was a hobby he was really interested in. The day before James' disappearance, he had a disagreement with his parents after they ended up finding marijuana in his jacket. You see, 3 years prior to this, James's older brother David had actually died from alcohol poisoning. James was actually the youngest of 6 siblings, and since he was the baby in the family, he was given extra attention by his older siblings. That day, one of James's older sisters and her boyfriend came over for a barbecue, and James actually ended up helping his dad work the smoker and cook the meat. And they all seemed to be having a really great evening. They even lit a bonfire. James's friend Austin came over and they all sat around and enjoyed it. However, it was when James and Austin were preparing to leave to go to a friend's house when his mother would end up getting his jean jacket for him, and inside the pocket she would find some marijuana. He was then told that he was not allowed to go over to this friend's house and that they needed to have a family meeting. Karen and Colin, rightfully so, had concerns about addiction considering their older son David ended up dying from alcoholism. Colin's sister was also addicted to meth, and he had seen how an addiction like that can affect his family and a person. But James admitted that he was using the marijuana, and he said he was using it to self-medicate because it helped him calm down and feel more calm, and he also said it helped him focus at school. However, Colin and Karen explained to James that drugs were not permitted in their home. On top of that, if James wanted to ride in the rodeo and he wanted that to be, his hobby or a career in the future, he was going to be drug tested in order to ride. And so they essentially explained to him if he wanted to pursue that hobby, he had to choose between weed or pursuing his dreams. Recently, a local woman had been boarding her horses at the family's farm, and in exchange, she was teaching James how to ride horses, since the family didn't have extra money to spend on him to do hobbies and activities like that. So it really seemed to work out for both parties. So James had this activity, he was doing some stuff that he loved, and from there, once he learned to ride horses, he could learn better to work at the rodeo, etc., etc. He had a lot of goals and dreams, it seemed. And the conversation seemed to go over well. James ended up making plans with his father for the next day. They all said, "I love you," and they went to bed. Around 12:30 a.m., Colin ended up being woken up when he heard some noise coming from near James's room. However, he passed it off as possibly coming from the family's 110-pound dog Reggie, who often slept at James's door, and when he'd roll over or shift, he'd hit against the door and cause the door to rattle. And the noise sounded like it could have been the door banging back and forth. So he didn't find it concerning, and he ended up going back to sleep. At 7 a.m., Colin and Karen once again would be woken up when their doorbell began to ring. And it turns out that they actually have a sensor doorbell that's in their driveway, so when a vehicle or something passes over it, it rings the doorbell in the house, which I've never heard of one of those before. That's actually pretty cool. That's actually a good safety measure as well, especially if you're living in a rural area, you can at least be alerted that someone's coming. So this doorbell starts going off and wakes him up, and when he looked outside, it turns out it was 2 deer that were actually walking back and forth and setting off the sensor. So again, not seeing anything of concern, Colin ended up going back to sleep, and he'd wake up around 9 a.m. That morning was August 6th of 2017. And after getting up and making breakfast and just, waking up for the morning, around 9:30 a.m., Colin ended up going over to James's room to wake him up, and he'd end up knocking on the door, but he wouldn't get a response. So he knocked again and again and still didn't get any response. So after the 3rd try, he ended up opening up James's door. But James was not in his bedroom. He then said the dog Reggie ended up coming out of the room into the hallway. Colin noticed that James's bed sheets were piled up on the bed, and so he went over to the bed sheets thinking James was under them, but James wasn't there either. This is when Colin noticed that the room was filled with mosquitoes, and when he went over to the window, he realized the screen was out of the window and the window was open, causing all of these bugs to come inside. Now, James's mother, Karen, had a broken leg, so she couldn't help Colin search the house or the property. So Colin began to search the house, thinking maybe James is in the bathroom, so he checked there, but he wasn't there. He went and looked on the porch, but James wasn't sitting out there. He then thought maybe James was out working on his new truck that he had just recently got, but James wasn't there either. James wasn't anywhere. So Colin ended up going back in James's room, and what he would find on James's desk was extremely alarming, because they would end up finding a handwritten unaliving note. And it started off by saying, "Dear family." James also wrote in this note how he had previously attempted to unalive himself the summer before when his father was on the road for work. However, he said he changed his mind because he didn't want to leave his mother alone to attend to the farm while his father was across the country. But it is said that in this note, James does state that he was going to attempt to unalive himself again. The note also contained James's request to take care of his dog Reggie. He wrote that he didn't want his family to be disappointed in him and that he wanted to go be with his brother David and another dog that had passed away in the recent years. It's also said he wrote in this note about a girl that he had feelings for that had turned him down. What was so strange, though, was that James's family had conversations with him about unaliving. The topic was brought up when someone close to them or someone on the news unalived themselves. And it was said that whenever that topic was brought up, James would always say that that was a long-term solution to a short-term problem. So was he just saying that because he thought that's what his family wanted to hear? It kind of seems like it, considering all of these things that he wrote in this note. When looking further into the room, it was noticed that James's lariats was actually missing, which is a rope used to lasso animals. His jean jacket, along with his straw hat, were also missing. However, his cowboy boots that he always wore were still at the home. They were actually sitting on the porch. And so it begs the question, did James leave the house barefoot? Because those were the shoes he would always wear, and the family never noticed another pair of shoes missing. It is important to note, again, that the parents had no idea that James was having these thoughts of unaliving himself, and they didn't even know until they read this note that he had attempted to a year before. So after finding this note, Colin ended up going and thoroughly searching the house again. He went and searched the barns and the other buildings that they had around the farm. He even went and looked in the nearby wooded area, wondering if he was going to find his son dead, which is an awful thing for someone to find their loved one dead like that. But after they couldn't find James anywhere, they immediately called the police. The RCMP came immediately and they began to search for days on end. Canines were brought in, helicopters flew over the rural area, police even came on horseback to search the forest. Yet James, nor anything related to him, was ever found. Now, it would come out that James was having a tough time in the months prior to his disappearance. At school, another student was actually continuously bullying him for only being 5'8". And what I have to say to that student is, one, fuck you for bullying someone for something that they can't even change, that they have no control over, like their height. And two, leave the short kings alone. And honestly, the bullying seemed to be pretty bad that James was experiencing at school, because his parents tried on multiple occasions to have the school intervene. However, the school didn't take it seriously, it seemed. His cousin Jacob, who was around the same age as him, was actually going to the same school as him for a while, and Jacob seemed to stand up for James against the bullying for quite a while. However, Jacob eventually moved to a different school, and that left James by himself again. And one day, James would rightfully so finally snap at this bully, and he ended up hitting him. And guess what? James is the one that got in trouble, and he ended up getting a 3-day suspension, and the bully had no repercussions whatsoever, which is ridiculous to me, in my opinion, that the school was doing literally nothing. Of course, you should never lay your hands on another person, but the fact that the school let the situation get so out of hand that it had to result in that, in my opinion, the school is negligent. And if you're getting harassed and bullied for long enough, you're eventually going to lash out and snap at the person. Karen and Colin would end up going on the Vanish podcast, and this is what they had to say about that.
We had gone there numerous times. Karen and I had both gone there, and we'll deal with it. We'll talk to them, but they would never admit that anybody was bullying. It's just kids will be kids, and it's not really kids will be kids. It's someone's being a jerk and bullying, and that's just the way it is. But that school, the principal, no, it's all fine. There's nothing like that here, or he would deal with it. And we heard a lot from a lot of other parents actually about the same things. Their child being bullied in that school, and nothing was done about it. So I told James when he was in high school, I said to him, James, if I got to get a hold of the RCMP, I said, we'll go to the RCMP. No, don't do that. Why not? If they're being assholes, they're hurting you or anything, we'll go to the RCMP. No, can't do that. So he wouldn't let me go to the police.
On another occasion, James had actually found a job that he was really, really excited for. He was really looking forward to it. However, he would eventually find out that he was actually too young to work the job because he needed to be 18 and he was only 17, so he ended up being passed up for it. And that was really devastating for him because he had just bought this new truck from his godfather and it needed some fixing up before it could run, and so he needed to get a job so that he could pay to fix it. His father actually tried to get him a job as well with his work, but then he also got passed up for that. On top of that, James didn't have his driver's license yet, and his family didn't have the money at that point in time to pay for his driver's license, because if you didn't know, driver's licenses are actually actually pretty expensive to get in Canada. They're like a few $100s. They take years to get your full license, at least in Ontario. I don't know if it's different out in Alberta. So it's not like in the States where some places you can just pay like $50 and, go and do the test, et cetera, et cetera. It's much cheaper in the States, I find. But his mother at that point wasn't working because she had broken her leg, and so they were just relying on Colin's income, which wasn't enough money to pay for extra stuff at that point. So not only did James not get the 2 jobs he was trying to get so that he could save money and work and pay for his vehicle, and then eventually he could probably pay for his own license as well then, but he also couldn't get any help to get something like his license. As I mentioned, James wrote in his note that he had a crush on a girl, but she didn't feel the same way, and that was something in those months prior that was also really weighing on him. And then on top of that, his brother had died only a few years prior to that, and he was extremely close to his brother, and so that was also just another layer of hard, heavy stuff that he was dealing with. But the years would pass, and no signs of James would be found. But by 2022, a group called Please Bring Me Home led a search through some heavily forested rural area around Vegreville. Cadaver dogs were brought in at this point in time because after they hadn't found James alive, that's kind of the next step, considering he did leave a note. And it said that these cadaver dogs actually tracked to a body of water. However, when the RCMP came in and drained that body of water, James wasn't there, and there was no evidence that James had ever been there, which is really weird considering if he had left possibly even barefoot from his home, which reminds me a lot of the current case of Sebastian Rogers that's going on right now. Why haven't the dogs tracked any scent from his home? Now, this isn't a case where I feel like the family might have done something to him, but it makes me question if maybe a vehicle was waiting somewhere for him and he got in the vehicle, which is why, obviously the dogs would be able to smell his scent around his home. He lived there. But leaving his home, they never tracked anywhere. So it does make me wonder, if he did leave barefoot, why hasn't there been any signs of him leaving barefoot? And even if he didn't leave barefoot and he put on some shoes, you think they'd still be able to track him. Now, on another occasion, James's Facebook ended up receiving a very frightening message, and the person was threatening the family, and it said, and I quote, "James, if you're still out there, I hope you'll answer this, or I'll be waiting at your front door until your parents go missing too." End quote. However, from what I've seen, police did try to investigate this message and figure out who this individual was that was using this Facebook account to write this message. But when they contacted Facebook, Facebook would not cooperate with the police. And from what I've seen, that is because Facebook's an American company and we're in Canada, and they would apparently only cooperate with the FBI and like American law enforcement, which in my opinion is ridiculous considering Facebook is globally used around the entire world by people. And it makes me really upset because I understand wanting to have, client privacy, blah, blah, blah on Facebook's end. But when there's a missing child and his family's getting threatened over your platform, you think they'd hand over some of that information like a ping, so the police can at least have something to go off of. So because of that, to this day, it's allegedly unknown who this person was that was threatening James's family. Over the years, there's also been several unconfirmed sightings of James in the Calgary area, a city nearly 400 kilometers away from where he disappeared. And one of these sightings was at a Walmart in the area. However, it was never confirmed and he was never actually seen on surveillance footage, it seemed. Now let's get to the theories. And the big question for me is, if James did end his own life, why hasn't he been found? Why hasn't his body been found anywhere? If he left on foot, he couldn't have gotten that far, realistically. Police were going around on not only helicopters, but on horseback, and they can travel a lot farther than someone can on foot. Yet, James and any evidence, his clothing, his hat, his lasso, any of that, none of that's ever been found. It also makes me wonder, why haven't cadaver dogs or canines tracked him anywhere from his home, as I said, besides that body of water, which was then drained and no evidence was found. He did seem to be having a hard time in his life at that point, and he did write that he was going unalive himself. He did write how he seemed to be having those kind of thoughts for a while. And considering he did live in a rural area, it is possible he did wander somewhere maybe far enough so that his family wouldn't find him and have to go through that trauma of finding him like that. But it does make me wonder how canines wouldn't have tracked him then. On the other hand, I guess there's always the possibility that maybe he did go try to start a new life somewhere, get a fresh start. He was having a really hard time in school. The girl he liked didn't like him. He couldn't get a job that he wanted. He couldn't get his truck. But then we also have to consider he didn't have a driver's license. He didn't seem to have a job then. So how much money did he truly have to be able to run away? All he took was his lariat, his straw hat, his jacket. It does make me question as well why he didn't take his shoes then. Why would he run away with no shoes? It brings up the question, maybe did he try to go work at a rodeo somewhere. But then again, he was only 17 years old. Most teenagers don't have the means to run away. Running away isn't that simple. You need to have a way to feed yourself. You need to have a way to house yourself. It's a lot more than just jumping on a bus somewhere. Having a fresh start costs money, or at least you need some kind of connections. And from what it seems, James did have some friends, but he wasn't, out there making friends across the world that had the means and money to house him and take care of him and keep him hidden for all this time, unless there is some kind of possibility where maybe he was talking to someone online and he decided to leave to go meet up with them. But then it begs the question, why did he leave that note? Unless he was trying to cover his tracks and he didn't want people looking for him, and he thought just if he made it seem like he was going to unalive himself, then people would not look for him. But that just seems very far-fetched in my opinion. But anything is honestly possible. And I wouldn't take the cards off the table that, the bullying might have gotten so bad that there was foul play involved. We do have to remember that his family did receive a threatening message on James's Facebook. It makes you question if James had gone off somewhere that night and, jumped out his window so his parents wouldn't hear him. Maybe he went to go hang out with his friends since he wasn't allowed to because of the weed getting found, and he was upset and he's like, I just want to go, blow off some steam and smoke some weed with my friends. And then you never know, maybe these bullies showed up, something happened to him. There's a realm of possibilities. We've seen stuff like that happen before. It also makes me question maybe if he was talking to someone that no one really knows about and he did go off to meet up with them and then foul play happened. But you think you'd find some kind of evidence on his phone or his social media or if he played video games, and you'd think that police would have went through all of that stuff, but I haven't seen anything mentioned about anything like that being found. But then again, it's like, why would he leave that note unless he didn't want people looking for him? But that's a very heavy thing to leave your family. And then again, it leads me back to the whole, if James did leave his house on his own free will to go do something that wasn't unaliving himself, why haven't police dogs tracked that? It makes me wonder, maybe he got picked up by someone and that's why the police dogs can't track somewhere. Maybe he got into a vehicle. But usually the simplest answer is the right answer. And the fact that he left that note, the biggest possibility is he did wander off somewhere and unalive himself so that his family wouldn't find him. And it's been years, so it really does make me wonder why not only cadaver dogs, but no one has stumbled upon his body yet, if that is what happened. Either way, this case leaves me with so many questions, and my heart truly hurts for James's family. Not only did they lose one son, but now they've lost two sons. And my heart also hurts for James if he thought the only solution for what was going on in his life was to unalive himself. He seemed like such a sweet boy that had so many dreams and goals in his life. And as a teenager, when life gets hard, things feel like they're magnified by 10. Everything can feel like the end of the world. Once you get older, you look back at past situations and you realize that it wasn't as bad as you thought it was, or it wasn't as dramatic as you thought it was. The simple fact of James liking a girl and her not liking him back, he could have eventually found a girl who actually cared about him as much as he cared about her. He could have found a job. He could have continued to pursue his dreams and his goals. As he used to say, unaliving yourself is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And he was only 17. He had so much more life to live. And so since we're talking about such a heavy subject, if you or anyone you know is having issues regarding, unaliving thoughts or anything like that, I'll have some contact information down below. Please seek help. Life is very hard for everyone right now, especially with the economy and everything going on in the world. There is hope, and your life is worth so much more than the things that are going on in it right now. Now, please take a look at James once again. He has been missing for 7 years now, and he would be around 24 years old at this point as his age progression photo shows. He stands 5'8" tall, and he was around 123 pounds when he went missing. He has brown hair and blue eyes. James was last thought to be wearing a gray shirt, jean jacket, blue jeans, and a beige straw cowboy hat. He also has a scar on his right knee from a chainsaw accident. This is a case that has honestly gotten little to no coverage. The Vanish podcast covered it, and I've seen a few smaller channels on YouTube cover it. But other than that, I couldn't even find news articles regarding James's disappearance. So if you're able to share James's missing persons flyer or share out this video or any contact relating to his disappearance, please do so. Please go follow his family's Facebook group where they provide updates. I'll have that link down below along with contact information if you have any tips that could lead to finding James. I'll have that information down below as well. If James is still out there, his family needs to find him, and if he is no longer alive, his family needs closure. My heart truly goes out to James's family. This is an awful situation and I can't even imagine. And I truly, truly do hope that James is found. So let's do our best to get some more notoriety on James's case. Again, if you're having any thoughts of unaliving or dealing with depression or anything like that and you need to speak to someone, I'll have links down below. As always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.